work, life, certainly writing books is exceedingly difficult. Everything that you guys are doing in this room is hard. And so if you're going to do it, my argument is that you might as well do it right? What is the point of killing yourself to write a book or make a screenplay or a video or a company or a fashion line if it's got an expiration date on it, right? If it's not going to stand the test of time, if it has no chance to endure. And so I've always been really interested in things that stand the test of time. We call them perennial sellers. This is my cow. Her name is Domino. But I'm interested in things that have really endured. That's sort of the thing that inspires me, right? Kikkoman soy sauce starts in 1917, so it's over 100 years old. It's pretty incredible. Fisker's scissors, 1649. Zildjian cymbals, 1623. Zildjian cymbals actually made drums for Napoleon's army, and they were like 200 years old at that point, right? And they're still around. There's a bell factory in Milan. I gave a talk there not long ago. This bell factory has been in business since the 11th century. They're still going strong. Not everything lasts that long, of course. Macy's has been in business since 1858. Pretty good run. You guys have your fair share of perennial sellers here, right? Well over 200 years. There's a diner right next to the Staples Center in Los Angeles where the Lakers play that I like to go to whenever I'm in Los Angeles. It's called the Original Pantry Cafe. It's been in business since 1924, so pretty good, not as long as some of the other ones I was talking about, but they opened in 1924, but the interesting quirk about this business is that they're open 24 hours a day, every day of the year. So they've been open non-stop since 1924. They actually don't have locks on the doors because they've literally never closed, right? It's pretty incredible. They're an all-cash business as well, so probably killing it as far as taxes go as well. But it's a great business. You can get diner food, you can get omelets, you can get steaks. It's just an awesome restaurant. You go in there, and almost every day, even though they've never closed for well over, for nearly 100 years, there's still a line outside most mornings. And that's because they do one thing, and they do it really well. They've got a reputation for it, right? And so the good news about these businesses, even though you might think, oh, they're old, they must be on the decline, is that actually research shows that things that stand the test of times, things that become classics, things that endure, tend to continue, right? We're not suddenly going to stop reading Shakespeare, right? People aren't tomorrow going to stop going to the pantry. And in fact, there's actually a phenomenon in economics. They call it the Lindy effect, which is named after a restaurant in New York City that's been in business since 1931. But the premise of the Lindy effect is that every year you stay in business, it doubles your half-life, right? The idea is that the longer you're in business, the longer you're going to stay in business, right? And that makes sense. The longer you stick around, you might eventually slow down or go out of business, but it's not going to happen like that. And so I'm interested in making things and working with products that have that kind of longevity, that have a chance to endure, that have a chance to become classic. And so we're going to walk through some rules, some principles that I've observed in my research and in my work that have helped these brands do that have helped companies stand the test of time. And the first lesson is the power of uniqueness. And that might seem basic, but it's not. There's a wonderful book called Blue Ocean Strategy, which I would encourage everyone to read. And the premise of the Blue Ocean Strategy is that you don't want to go where there's competition, you want to go where there's no competition. They say a blue ocean is where there's no competition. Red ocean, the bloody water of competition, is precisely what you want to avoid. And when you look at most successful businesses, most things that stand the test of time, it happens to be that they owned an area, they owned a niche. There were not 1,000 other diners right next to the pantry, and today there's almost nothing in that neighborhood except the pantry, right? You want to own a niche, you want to be unique, you want to stand out. And so Peter Thiel, the first founder of Facebook, the first founder of PayPal, one of the first investors in Facebook, he talks about this idea of, he says, the whole point of business is to have a monopoly, right? He says, his joke, which I like, he says, competition is for losers. And what he means is you want to avoid competition because you can lose a competition, but when you're the only one, when you own the niche, this is really beneficial. So you want to go where there's the least amount of competition, where you can have a monopoly. So this is a question I think about when I'm making stuff. I go, has anyone done something similar? If so, not interested in it. Is this something I can own and do and be the only one in that space? Then I am interested. So actually, when I wrote Perennial Seller, my publisher came to me and they asked me to write a book about book marketing. I've worked with authors that have sold millions and millions of copies of books. My own books have sold well. I've pioneered some strategies as far as book marketing goes. But as I was looking at it, I realized there was a lot of other books in that space. So even though the proposal sold right away, as I was doing my market research, I realized that the chance of enduring, of even breaking through, were low because it was so crowded, right? And I'm not saying that all these books are good. A lot of them aren't. Some of them are pretty good. But I realized that I didn't want to go head to head with these people. I wanted to go somewhere where I could own my own niche, something that hadn't been written. And so one of the reasons I wrote Perennial Seller is that there were lots of books about how to market things. There were not a lot of books about how to make things that marketed themselves and that stood the test of time. Right? All the books about marketing are about how to be popular right now. They're not about how to create enduring success. And so this small pivot ultimately is what makes the book a success. The best marketing decision I made was not in the interviews that I did or my social media strategy. It was the decision early on to pivot the product, right? And we see this over and over again. Instagram, right? Instagram starts as a social network called Bourbon, which was very similar to Foursquare, right? And nobody really liked it. But they did like this one feature inside of it where you could upload photos and then add filters to the photos, right? Instagram pivoted to become Instagram. And this decision is single-handedly responsible for their success. Everything that comes after is second to the fact that they pivoted to a niche where they were not one of many, but they were the only, right? And another book I'll recommend is a book called The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. And they say the first law of marketing is the law of leadership. They say you want to be first, right? Well, they say, okay, what happens if you can't be first, right? You want to invent a new category in which you are first, even if it's a small pivot. And so my book is still a book ultimately about marketing products and marketing books, but I pivoted so I'm the only one in that space. The saying is, only is better than best, right? You want to be the only one doing it. This is where you have a monopoly, and this is where you stand out. And so when I talk to people about doing projects, and they're telling me why they think the market is really good, why they think it's trendy, why they think it's hot, these are bad signs. I want to talk to someone who's doing something they feel like they were put on this planet to do, where they feel like it's new and groundbreaking and fresh, where they're the only ones. I say a reason to write a book is not because you can make money doing it, because it's going to help your brand. Do it because you can't not do it. And again, as Elon Musk was saying, if starting a company is so painful, don't start a company because you're cashing in on a trend. Do a company because you feel like it needs to exist, because you feel like it's a failure of the market that it doesn't exist, right? These are the sort of powerful forces that you want to tap into as a creator and as a marketer. But of course, also, the product has to fundamentally do the job, right? If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter what kind of monopoly you have. It doesn't matter how new or groundbreaking your product is. It has to do the job. This is a pair of Red Wing boots that I have. I bought these boots almost 10 years ago. They were $300. I thought that is an insane amount of money to spend on boots. This is sort of before sneaker culture a little bit, so $300 for shoes did feel pricier then. But these are $300 boots. And Red Wing boots, they're one of the last shoe manufacturers in the United States. They actually started making boots. Their first contract was with the U.S. Army to make boots for the troops in World War I. Right? So they've been around a long time. They do the job. These boots are worth $300, but I still wear them, right? They work great. You can, every couple years, you can send them back into the manufacturer. They put new laces, they clean up the leather, they put a new sole on them, and they're as good as new. You could probably get a pair from 1918 and still wear them. A product that does the job is what has a chance to endure, right? Quality really matters. The funny thing about Red Wing boots is when you first get them, they're the most uncomfortable thing you've ever put on in your life. The leather is hard, it's not very malleable, but you're actually supposed to wear them into the shower. You wear the boots in the shower, the water forms the leather around your feet, and then they become like a glove, and they're so comfortable. So fundamentally, the product has to do the job. And look, I like these Nikes, but I have no illusions that I will still be wearing these Nikes 10 years from now, right? They're just not built to stand the test of time. But really great products do. Really great products. When I was the director of marketing at American Apparel, one of our strategies was we wanted to make clothes that were so good that in many years we could find them in thrift stores. We wanted them, even though that was kind of bad for business in some ways, right? Because if people can reuse them, they're not going to buy new ones. But that reputation for quality is really important. Patagonia, the clothing manufacturer, does this. They actually have a marketing campaign that will sometimes say, don't buy a new jacket, right? Don't buy this jacket. Come into our store, bring one of your old jackets, and we'll repair it and update it for you, right? What they want to do is they want to sell clothes, they want to sell products that do the job, that build that sort of lifelong affinity and love that endure, because that's the best marketing that you can have for a product, right? Think about all your favorite things, the things you really love. We're going to talk a little bit more about this, but the things you really love, chances are somebody else told you about them, right? And they didn't tell you about them because they were trendy. They told you about them because they did the job, because they were really good, right? And so often when I talk to people, they don't actually know what job their product is doing. They don't know if it's doing it well, and they don't know who it's doing it for, right? Red Wing Boots knows who they're making boots for. They know they're in the boot business, and they know these boots are going to stand up to whatever kinds of stresses or wear and tear that people put on them. So you really have to know what you're making, who you're making it for, and why you're making it. Because not only does this allow you to answer whether you're actually doing it, right? Whether you're delivering the quality that you're promising, but it also helps you from a marketing standpoint know what your promise and your premise is, right? If you don't know who you're making this for and what it's supposed to do, if you just know, oh, we're an app that's kind of like Facebook, and then we do a little of this, then we do a little of that, all of a sudden that's not a compelling marketing pitch, and that's not going to break through the noise. So knowing what job you're doing and who you're doing that job for is deeply important. I remember I was talking to my editor about my first book, and I was talking about how I wanted to hit the bestseller list and who I wanted to review it, what kind of attention I was getting, what I wanted it to look like. And she said, it's not what a book is, it's what a book does. She was saying I was thinking about the wrong things. What I wasn't talking about is the value that I was delivering to the reader. And ultimately, that's the only reason that people pick up books. It's the only reason they buy boots. It's the only reason they buy clothes. It's the only reason they sign up for a bank. Does it do the job, right? And this is true for all kinds of products, including music. Max Martin, one of the most successful songwriters of all time, I think he actually has more #1 hits than the Beatles. He subjects all his music to what he calls the Pacific Coast Highway test. So he records a demo of a song, and then he gets in his car, usually a convertible, and he drives up and down the Pacific Coast Highway, which runs up from Los Angeles through Malibu to Santa Barbara. It's one of the most beautiful highways in all of America. But it's right there along the ocean. You can hear the waves crashing. The idea is, does the music make this experience better? Do you find yourself singing along to the song in the car? Because if you don't, then the songs aren't doing its job, right? And so even music, which we think of as just entertainment, that's a job, right? Is this entertaining? Is this actually delivering value? One of my mentors is a writer. He said, Ryan, the key to a book is that it's got to be extremely entertaining or extremely practical, right? So this goes back to the other question, right? It's a blank that does blank for blank, right? What job is it doing? And then are you actively testing and iterating and changing until you are confident that you are doing that? And if you launch too early, if you go to the public before you do your job, before you're delivering that value, people are going to know, and it's going to be dead on arrival. And so I think, as we're thinking about the job, right, as we're thinking about the job that products do, we want to make sure that we're rooting what we're making in some core part of the human experience. And I think the things that endure, they tap into something that's going to continue to endure. So if you're tapping into some present-day anxiety or some of-the-moment trend, well, what happens if that trend or that anxiety or that feeling goes away? Well, then your product's going to feel irrelevant. It's like the tide goes out and you're stuck there on the shore. You want to tap into something that goes deeper into the human experience, right? So is Star Wars a cutting-edge science fiction movie when it comes out? Are people seeing it because of all the cool special effects and the celebrities that are in the movie and its awesome marketing campaign? Actually, no. Star Wars is beaten its opening week at the box office by a movie called Smokey and the Bandit in the United States. But it's gone on to be probably the most valuable movie franchise of all time because it's not really a science fiction movie. It's not really a special effects movie. George Lucas, as he's writing Star Wars, is rooting it in the hero's journey, right? The journey of Luke Skywalker is the same journey as the story of Gilgamesh, which is more than 5,000 years old. It's the same story as the Odyssey. It's the same journey even as Jesus Christ, right? The journey of the hero being called, refusing the call, answering the call, going forth, the challenges that go along with the human journey. This is why people continue to see Star Wars more than 40 years after it comes out. This is why they're continuing to make more and more movies. This is why Disney has just built a theme park around Star Wars, because it taps into something timeless. I was walking through the bookstore on my way here. They're selling Star Wars bags there because the Star Wars story taps into something that goes deep into who we are. And actually, George Lucas says that Joseph Campbell, who created the idea of the hero's journey, the mono-myth, he sort of popularizes this, was his Yoda. So this wasn't an accident that Star Wars taps into this journey. This is built into it. And so you have to ask yourself, is what you're making, is what you're doing tapping into some universal human experience? The best art does that. It goes into something that makes us who we are, and by speaking to that, by articulating it, by putting it up there for us to see, we fall in love with it. And then that's why it passes from generation to generation and group to group. I think about this Guy Kawasaki. I know he's spoken in Romania before. He wrote a book a few years ago called Enchantment, right? It's more than 10 years ago. We have the same publisher. It's a great book. It's done extremely well because it talks about how we win the hearts and minds of our customers. Then a few years later, he wrote a different book called What the Plus? Google Plus for the rest of us. Now, which one of these books is likely to endure, to stand the test of time? The one about winning hearts and minds, which is a timeless part of the human experience, or the one that's trying to cash in on an of-the-moment trend, right? And even if Google Plus had lasted, even if Google Plus had become the next Facebook, which one is actually likely to endure and stand the test of time, right? Even if you'd written a book in 2004 about Facebook, it would already be irrelevant. Things would have changed, right? You'd have to have updated it all these times, right? And so by rooting it in something deeper, Enchantment is a perennial seller that continues to sell year in and year out. It's never gone out of print. Probably never will go out of print. But What the Plus, of course, is forgotten almost immediately, right? Because it doesn't go to what matters as a human being. And again, I'm not saying you can't make money doing things that are of the moment. I'm just saying they're likely to only be of the moment. The truth is, Guy Kawasaki, as good as Enchantment is, and as well as my books have done, the real book to have written would be What to Expect When You're Expecting, right? This is a book that sold something like 20 million copies. It sells millions of copies every single year because people every day get pregnant and have no idea what to do, right? Or people's daughters get pregnant, or they're having grandchildren, right? People, or your friend gets pregnant and you, what book should I read? I don't know what to do. I have a problem. Please help me, right? And so addressing some pain point, some frustration, some ever-present fear or worry or uncertainty, these things that make us human are really where the real market opportunity is. It's also where the meaning is. Imagine writing a book and knowing that you helped however many people get through a difficult time. As lucrative as it was financially for them, I'm sure, it's also deeply satisfying and meaning. I've cheated with my books. The reason my books have sold well and are in all these different languages, I don't think it's because I'm such a genius. I think it's by rooting my books in something as time-tested and proven as Stoicism, something that is more than 2,500 years old, has been a sort of a hack in terms of enduring. So The Obstacle is the Way is based on the work of Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius has endured for 2,000 plus years. So by basing my book on him, I'm able to ride that wave, right? I know it goes to something that's likely not to become untrue suddenly, right? This is the Lindy effect working for me. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, he says we have to focus on the things that don't change. That's what Star Wars taps into, is something that doesn't change. Becoming pregnant, even as different as technology is, as culture changes, at the end of the day, it's still the same fundamental thing, right? Winning the hearts and minds, enchantment, same fundamental thing. So you want to focus on what doesn't change. And even as technologically innovative as a company like Amazon is, at the end of the day, they're rooted in the principle of making great products, right? He says people always want things cheap and they always want them fast, right? You want to focus on the demands of your customers, on the demands of the population that don't change, not things that are going to be rendered irrelevant, right? You don't want to be this guy, right? You don't want to be getting a Bitcoin tattoo. You want to root what you're doing, what you're building your life around, not on what's of the moment, but what is timeless. And of course, even if you do have something that's timeless, you still want it to be provocative. You want it to be timely. That was another thing I got from one of my mentors. He says, you want to focus on what's timely in what is timeless, right? And so controversy is a way to get attention, and that's what I try to do once I create a product or I'm marketing something. This is Matisse's Blue Nude. When this painting comes out, it's burned in effigy. It's so controversial and provocative, and it challenges so many assumptions. But you can now buy a print of it at Walmart, right? So when you create a monopoly, when you go to something that's new, when you do something that does the job, it can often piss people off in the moment. This is a powerful engine, but ultimately you've tapped into something timeless and true. So I'm not afraid to piss people off. I actually kind of like it. Elizabeth Wurtzel says, either you're controversial or nothing at all is happening. And I think that's unfortunately the reality of a lot of people's products is they're so boring that they don't get attention, right? And you don't want to be boring. Rick Rubin, maybe the most successful record producer of all time, he says the best art divides the audience. So when he works with a heavy metal band, he tells them to go heavier. When he works with a rap artist, he tells them to lean into what makes them provocative and new and interesting. You don't want to please everyone. You want to please your fans, right? You want to please the people who really like what you do. You got to do the job for the right people, right? And so being divisive or being polarizing is often a sign that you've really owned something, that you've really done it well. And you can't be afraid of that, right? Often some of the best products were controversial or boycotted or maybe even overlooked when they came out because they were so controversial, right? And that's fine. And this is an easy way to get a monopoly if you think about it, right? An easy way to get a monopoly is to make something that other people are afraid to make, something that other people are afraid to touch, things that other people are too conservative to think about. And that's an easy way to get attention as well, right? Is to do the things and be the things that other people are afraid of, right? Being on the razor's edge, if you've made something that's awesome, that does the job, that's timeless, is a great place to be. And it's okay not to be for everyone. Chances are if you're for everyone, you're really for no one, right? And you're not going to endure and you're not going to stand the test of time. It's better to be for some people, a small group of people, than it is to be for everyone and therefore no one. And I'm not saying that if you just make something awesome, it's automatically going to find its audience. Unfortunately, it's a noisy world out there. The world is not a meritocracy, right? Plenty of amazing things don't get the attention that they deserve. And so being a creative marketer is a critical part of this as well, right? And that's where some of that controversy comes in. But being willing to push the boundaries, to do innovative things, to pull stunts that are going to draw attention in, because once people find your product and it does the job for them, then you're off to the races. I've done things like I've held an atheist church service in the middle of the Bible Belt in the United States, because doing something like that is the kind of thing that the New York Times begs you if they can come attend and write about, right? I've sent books into space for my author clients, right? Because I knew that's so unusual and that's so weird, it would get attention. People would hear about it and read it, and then because it does the job, they would tell other people about it. At American Apparel, we sponsored porn stars, and we bought blogs, we bought ads on porn websites because no one else was there. Not because we knew that that would sell a lot of products as far as advertising goes, but we knew it would get attention. The media would write about it because no one had done something like this before. And so being willing to push the envelope is a way to get attention, again, because you can have a monopoly because no one else is there. I've bought ads for less than $1,000 and then gotten national media about it. More people saw the ads from the articles being written about it than they did from the ads themselves. But that was the entire purpose of the stunt, right? I'm doing it to get the media attention, not because the advertising is actually effective. But as far as the public is concerned, it doesn't really matter. So we're always willing to push the envelope, we're always willing to do controversial things because we know that on the back end we have a product that's going to do the job, that once people see it's going to do it. I remember with a book a few years ago, we were the first author to ever sell a book for Bitcoin, right? About 3 people bought the book on Bitcoin, with Bitcoin. Those Bitcoins are probably worth like $1 billion now. But the point was, we were one of the first people to do this, right? But very few people actually participated in it. And yet we were on CNBC, we were on the front page of Yahoo. We got all sorts of media attention precisely because we were the first one to do something. So being willing to experiment, to try new things. When I'm thinking about advertisements, if I'm the first person to ever advertise there, that's worth a lot to me, right? If publications are going to write about a new experimental campaign, I like that, even if I know the campaign's probably not going to work. What I'm trying to do is rack up attention, get people to know I exist because I was the first person to try something. And you just can't be boring, right? Boring brands pay a premium. The reason that insurance companies and banks and B2B technology companies have to spend so much money on advertising is because they're boring and nobody knows what they do and why they should care, right? But if you can stand out, if you can be interesting, if you can be provocative, not only do you get a better ROI in your advertising, but you spend less. I want to be a company that punches above their weight because we're provocative and interesting. Boring is a liability, right, in 2019. You pay extra to compensate for the fact that you're boring, that you can't articulate what you do, why you do it well, who you do it for. But when you nail those things, then you have the ability to stand out from the crowd. You have to, of course, build a tribe, right? That's the other thing. Like, who are you? When you know who you're making this for, then you know really who to focus on, and you know who to ignore. And then that's the best part, you know who you can piss off, because they weren't your customers to begin with, right? Stefan Zweig, one of the great writers, one of the great European writers of the 20th century, he said, the most valuable thing a writer can have is a faithful following who looks for everything that you do, whose trust you don't want to disappoint. Everyone wants a platform, everyone wants a tribe, but they don't do the work to build it, right? They don't focus on it, and then they wonder why they don't have it. I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan. Iron Maiden, I saw them in San Antonio a couple weeks ago. They sold out a stadium in the United States 40 years after the band came out. This is a band that hasn't been on the radio in decades, has never really been on MTV. They've never been cool, right? They're kind of an absurd band, right? They have 3 lead guitarists. It's insane. They sing 12-minute songs about poems and Alexander the Great, but they know who their audience is, and they make great stuff for them. And that core fan group is what sustained them over decades and decades. And so when I saw them, it was awesome. It was incredible. Sold out the crowd. I would say it's a lot of dudes. It's probably most of the guys. Sorry, we're stuck here. What was so cool about this show is like not only was it filled with people, it was filled with multiple generations of people. People brought their kids, people brought their grandkids at this point, which makes sense. All the members of the band are like 70 at this point. But when you make something for a tribe, that's what really matters. And the band talks about this, right? They actually fly from show to show in their own 757, which is piloted by the lead singer, right? But it's incredible. Iron Maiden, one of the best marketing essays of all time is the idea of 1,000 true fans. Iron Maiden probably has about 1 million true fans worldwide, and this is what sustains them. Bruce Dickinson says, he's the lead singer, he's the one that can fly the plane. He says, we have our field, and we've got to plow it, and that's it. He says, what's going on in the next field is of no interest to us. We can only plow one field at a time. So you can see this focus on who their fans are, their field, what kind of music they make, it allows them to ignore when grunge is a trend, when hair metal is a trend, when indie rock is a trend, when rap is a trend, when EDM is a trend. They don't care what other bands are doing, they care what they're doing. And actually the manager of Iron Maiden was once approached at a music industry conference, and some young kid came up to him and said, "You're my hero in the music business." And the manager, he laughed, he says, "I'm not in the music business." He said, "I'm in the Iron fucking Maiden business." And I think that's a lesson for all of us. We're not in the tech industry. We're not in the e-commerce industry. I'm not in the book industry. I'm in the Ryan Holiday industry. You're in the industry of servicing your tribe, your customers. That's what really matters. Are you servicing those people? Are you making something for them? What is going on for other people, what other people are caring about, is of no interest to you. Star Wars is in the Star Wars industry. Apple is in the business of making those products for those people that line up in front of their stores before a new product launch. You got to know who those people are, and you got to care about them more than just about anyone else. And Lady Gaga has picked up on this. Someone said to her, "Are you the next Madonna?" And she said, "I'm not the next Madonna, I'm the next Iron Maiden." And you can see why that would be important to someone like her, right? Because as radio goes away, as Spotify earnings become less and less, it's very hard to make money selling music. But selling out concerts 40 years after you started, that's where the money is. At the Iron Maiden concert I went to, there's probably 20,000 people there. I bet 19,000 of them were wearing Iron Maiden t-shirts, right? They probably sold 5,000 t-shirts at the show, right? And 5,000 t-shirts at $50 a pop, there's better margins there than on probably a billion Spotify streams, right? And they've had a great run. They've done 16 studio albums, 11 live albums, 24 world tours, 2,000 concerts in 60 countries. They've sold almost 100 million albums. They've hit #1 5 times, 42 singles, and they have 15 million followers on social media. That is an enormous tribe, right? And that tribe is enough to sustain them. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world. It doesn't matter what changes happen to the music industry. The Iron Maiden industry is strong, right? And at the show I went to in San Antonio, this is the importance of tribe. This was the Iron Maiden VIP package that doesn't include a ticket to the show. Just $220, and it basically just gives you a bandana, a beer koozie, like a backpack, a t-shirt, and a license plate holder. And people were excited to buy this, right? It sold out before the show. And so when you can make awesome things, people are happy for that experience. This is a meaningful expression of their interest, of their fandom in the band. And again, the margins on these things are incredible compared to the margins that involve various middlemen, right? And so you want to make something, you want to know who those people are, and you want to be able to make things just for them. But people don't think about that. People think about making more and more of the same thing rather than making stuff for that audience. That was something I realized as an author. I knew, okay, I want to be an author, I want to have a tribe. Well, how? How can I do that? How can I build a tribe for people who want to read my books before I've written any? And so that was something I did. Almost 11 years ago now, I started an email list where I just recommended books. I knew that in many years in the future I would write my own, but how could I build a tribe? And so I built a tribe of people who liked books. This list started with 50 people. I just put up a blog post and I said, who wants book recommendations? It was small enough that I would just put them in the BCC field of a Gmail email once a month. But this list has steadily grown. It grew from 50 to 30,000 subscribers. Now it's over 200,000 people worldwide that I recommend books to every month. And I've done this year after year after year. And the only way I've monetized this list is every couple years I put out a book of my own and I tell this tribe, hey, I have a new book. And it always sends it to the top of the Amazon charts because I've cultivated a relationship with these people. And at the back of each one of my books, I put a call to action to sign up for this list. So I want to be capturing those fans. Great comedians, great authors, great brands, build email lists, have access to that tribe. Having lots of Twitter followers or Facebook fans is great, except for they're not yours. Those fans are owned by that social network, and that's why they could charge you for access to it, right? An email list has a 50% open rate, right? The average tweet is seen by less than 10% of your fans. The average Facebook post is seen by less than 10% of your fans. I want to have home addresses that I can mail stuff to, right? I want to have direct, uninterrupted access to my fans, right? And so I give gifts, I give promotions. I want to give things away to acquire this data, to acquire this information, so I can have that direct relationship with my fan. So it doesn't matter, right? When Iron Maiden isn't being played on the radio, that's okay. That's not how they sell albums. They sell albums by telling Iron Maiden fans, we have a new album, right? They sell tickets by telling Iron Maiden fans, we're going on tour and we're going to be in your city. They don't need a new music video on MTV, if MTV even played music videos anymore. They don't need media to get attention because they own that relationship with their fans. Well, I wrote a book a few years ago called Daily Stoic. It was 1 page a day. And then I thought, well, what happens at the end of that book? I want to continue that relationship. And so I started a free email where I wrote 1 page a day for free. I've now done this for 3 years. That means I've given away 3 full books, right, at dailystoic.com. But the relationship, the hundreds of thousands of people who get this email every day, I think we sent something like 50 million emails last year to this list, is the tribe that I've built around this book. And then I've been able to make products for them. I can do live events for these people. I have access. I own the relationship with those fans. And the margins ultimately on the products that I can make and sell directly to these people in the way that the Iron Maiden tour package was, is far better than the royalties that I would get on a book, which I have a publisher middleman for, right? The other thing, and I think Iron Maiden's a great example of this, I just spent like way too much of my talk telling you about my favorite band. You want to find your champions. Who are your fans? Who are the influencers, the people who are going to help you break out, who are going to tell people about your work? Ask the Dust. It's one of my favorite novels, right? I'm going to champion a novel for you right now. Ask the Dust was written in the early 1900s by an Italian immigrant living in Los Angeles. It's sort of a West Coast version of The Great Gatsby. It's a beautiful, haunting, fictional account of a writer struggling against racial prejudice, fighting to achieve his dreams. But it came out just a few months before World War II broke out. And it happened that the writer's publisher had also published an illegal edition of Mein Kampf in the United States. And Hitler sued him in America and won and bankrupted his publisher. And so this book was lost for almost 100 years. Nobody knew that it existed because the publisher didn't have a marketing budget. He was dependent on media for getting attention, and it fell by the wayside. And it wasn't until Charles Bukowski walked into the Los Angeles Public Library and found an old dusty copy of Ask the Dust in the 1980s that the book was rediscovered. He said it was like finding gold in the city dump. And he told his publisher about it, and he talked about it in interviews, and he talked about this book to everyone who would listen, and all of a sudden it was republished, it became a bestseller, became even a movie in the United States. It sold millions of copies. It's now considered to be one of the great American novels. That's the power of a champion. An influencer, a champion, a cheerleader can rescue a work from obscurity. And you have to cultivate those relationships. You have to make something that's awesome that does the job, right? He says it's like finding gold. So your work has to be gold, but then you also have to cultivate the relationships with the kind of people that can break something out like that. In the history of late night television, Johnny Carson was known for breaking comedians, right? You would perform on the Johnny Carson show, and it was being called over to the couch, right? If you liked your performance, and he invited you to sit on the couch, that made you as a comedian. He was a champion of comedians. And you wanted to get the thumbs up, not the thumbs down. If you got the thumbs up, that meant you were endorsed, right? And so today we talk about influencer marketing, but people I think are way too transactional about it. They just think, does this person have a lot of followers? Can I purchase an advertisement from them? You should be thinking, who are the tastemakers in your space? And if you really made something that's going to get them excited, they're going to fall in love with, that they're going to believe is like finding gold, and they're going to tell everyone about it. One of the best marketing things I do for my book is I go through Instagram and I see all the verified followers that follow my accounts, and I give them free copies of my stuff. I'll give them an unlimited amount of free copies, right? Because I know that if they like it, they'll tell people about it, right? I don't pay them anything, I don't ask anything of them, but I know if I make something good for someone who has an audience, it's gonna make a difference, right? This is some books I sent to an Olympic gold medalist. She posted about it, and the books were sort of off to the races, right? That's how my books made their way through professional sports. I heard there was a coach at the New England Patriots who read one of them. So I sent him not one more book, I sent him a box of books. And he began to give them out to people that he knew, and they wormed their way through sports. If you have something that does the job for a concentrated audience, word of mouth is your friend. If you don't, no amount of influencer marketing is ever going to work for you, right? But if it does, then champions can be incredibly powerful in building something that lasts, that endures, right? And then it made its way, then as the trend became real, then media started reporting on the trend, and then the books have now sold close to 2 million copies worldwide. One of the reasons I sold the audiobook rights for The Obstacle is the Way and Ego is the Enemy and The Daily Stoic to Tim Ferriss, I probably could have made more money selling them to a traditional publisher. But there's actually something in publishing we call the Tim Ferriss effect. The Tim Ferriss effect means people with large audiences who have credibility with their audience, when they endorse something, when they fall in love with it, it matters because it means something. When a faceless media outlet says, oh, I give this 5 out of 5 stars, what does that matter? But someone you follow, someone you're a fan of, when they say something's good, you care, right? And that's what the Tim Ferriss effect is about. Having a person like Tim publish those audiobooks was far more meaningful than having a publisher, right? Who cares what movie studio made a movie, right? But you do care what actor is in it, or in some cases you might care who directed it, right? You care about who made it, right? Who really was invested, who put their credibility on the line for it. And then you have to think long-term. We don't think long-term enough. I was talking earlier about focusing on what doesn't change, but also I think people are too focused on the short term. They don't give themselves the runway they need to succeed. Seth Godin is talking about how in book publishing, even though the vast majority of income comes from what we call the backlist, books that are more than a year old, the vast majority of energy, of marketing dollars, of promotional support goes to new books. My publisher is in business because books that were published 50 or 100 years ago are still selling. Penguin Classics sells millions of copies every year. That's what's paying for everyone's salaries. That's what's paying for my book advances. And yet, we focus only on the new celebrity cookbook or the celebrity diet book, or the new, right now everything's about Trump in America, right? We focus on the controversial new thing, but this comes at the expense of the long-term thing. And this is true in the music business. Catalog albums that are more than 18 months old, sell more than all the new releases combined. And yet, all the marketing budget, all the attention is on signing brand new acts, even though most new acts don't go anywhere. So people are not only do people not focus on what's old, they don't invest long enough. Like, I have to constantly be reminding my publisher, just because my book is a year old or 2 years old or 5 years old, doesn't mean that it's not still selling. And the fact that it is still selling, that means we should continue to support it. The Obstacle is the Way came out in 2014. It didn't hit any bestseller lists. It sold well, but it just sold steadily. It sold steadily. But it hit #1 on the bestseller list for the first time in May of 2019. It took 5 years to get there. And it took 5 years, and it finally did get there because I didn't quit on it. I kept going, I kept pushing. Too many people go, oh, I gave it 2 weeks, I did a marketing launch. The launch is just the beginning, right? It's a sprint and a marathon. Can you keep going? Can you stay invested? This is what matters. But it's actually funny, the bestseller list in publishing, if you see here, among the categories not tracked by the bestseller list are perennial sellers. They deliberately exclude what sells steadily over time because we have this newness bias, right? And so you have to actively push past this. You can't care what's going on right now, what people are focused on, what's getting the media attention. You want to focus on what's going to endure. You want to have a long-term sales cycle. Like again, with books, you could sell 10,000 copies in 1 week and hit the bestseller list. Or you could sell 1,000 copies a week for a year and not hit any bestseller list. But what would you rather sell, 10,000 copies or 52,000 copies, right? But the bias is towards what gets recognized, what gets attention, and not what's actually mattering over the long term. And this is the reason you can't quit on stuff. Like, all the people that have, way more people in the universe have not read my books than have read books. And remembering this lets me know that I still have marketing work to do, rather than thinking that because they've sold well, because they hit the bestseller list, I'm done. It's actually the opposite. People who are not your customers are new, right? And so the book or the movie or the video or the blog post or your product is new to them. And you can market it as if it's new, as if it's just come out. Because as far as they're concerned, it has, right? I won't wrap this for you, but Drake is saying that it doesn't matter who people are raving about now. What matters is who's going to be around a decade from now. That's what's important. This is the La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, right? It's set to be finished in 2026. That will be the 100-year anniversary of the architect's death, right? Greatness takes time. You can't quit on it. It goes longer than you expect, right? Actually, they were just fined, like, I think $30 billion by the EU for operating, or $35 million by the EU for not having building permits for the last 150 years either. But it doesn't matter, it's worth it, right? And so sometimes when I think about projects going over budget, taking a little bit longer than I thought, being slow, not being recognized right away, I go, look, it's not this, right? I'm a little bit ahead of schedule compared to the La Sagrada, right? And so greatness takes time, right? It always takes longer than you expect. And again, Star Wars is beaten opening weekend by a movie that nobody remembers. So it doesn't matter who's popular week in and week out. What matters is a year from now, 5 years from now, a decade from now, are you still there? Are you still enduring? Are you still landing? So before I wrap up, I thought I'd leave you with some quick questions. This is my donkey. His name is Buddy. He likes the book, as you can tell. There's obviously other principles that go into to making things that last. Of course, right? It's good to be first. You got to get lucky. You have to run your business well. You have to reinvest your profits. You have to take more shots, right? One of the things we say in publishing is the best marketing you can do for your book is to write another book, right? You have to keep going. You have to get better. You have to stay at it. There's lots of things that go into enduring, so I can't get into all of them. I only have a little bit of time here. There's lots of things, but I think those big principles are the main ones I would leave you with. But the final question the final thought I would leave you as creators and marketers is that life is very brief, right? We don't know how long we're going to be here for. I carry a coin in my pocket. This is something I made for Daily Stoke. It says, Memento Mori. And on the back it says, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. That's from Marcus Aurelius. And I think Marcus Aurelius' advice is worth thinking about as we're marketing, as we're building our businesses. Because are we really doing our best, right? Are you making the market, are you making the world a better place by what you make, right? These are questions we want to be thinking about, right? Are you creating work that can endure? Are you thinking about whether you were put on the planet to make this thing, right? Are you happy with yourself even if it doesn't? You can read the reviews. When Herman Melville's Moby Dick came out in the late 1800s, it was savaged. Everyone hated it, right? Again, some great things are controversial. But he knew he made a masterpiece. He knew that it mattered. He knew that eventually it would find its audience. And that allowed him to be satisfied with that. That's something I have to think about with my books, right? It took 5 years for The Obstacle Is the Way to hit the bestseller list. But what mattered is that I knew that I made what I was trying to make, and I knew that it was working for the people it was supposed to be working for. The popularity, the success, I didn't control that. That would come eventually, if at all, but I wasn't going to stress it if it didn't, right? Are you working on something that is the kind of legacy that you want to leave, right? And if it's not, ask yourself, what are you doing? You only have so much time, right? You can only make 1 or 2 or 3 things in your lifetime, really meaningful, major things. Are you spending that time wisely, or are you trying to cash in on a trend? And again, you might be successful cashing in on that trend, but you can't take the money with you when you die. So you might as well work on something that really matters, that you care about, that's meaningful, right? Are you doing what you were put on the planet to do? Are you doing the thing that only you can do? Are you doing the kind of things that would be painful if you didn't do them, right? That's my rule for a book. If I cannot do the book, I'm not going to do the book because it's better, right? It'd be better if I didn't. I'm not going to go through the pain if I can avoid it. But if it's something I feel I can't not do, that's a sign that I'm onto something. That's a sign that I've got the right intentions, that it matters, right? Was the joy of doing it enough is enough. This is what Stoicism talks about. Ultimately, we only control the effort, we only control the process, we don't control the results, right? Might not be recognized as great when it comes out, might not get the attention that it deserves, might be overshadowed by something else. You might not make it all the way to release date, but was the joy of doing it enough? Was the process enough? Was the experience enough? That's what you want to be thinking about, right? So memento mori, you could leave life right now. You only have so much time. Are you investing in it, the right stuff? Are you spending the right stuff on it? That's what matters. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
We have time for questions. No, I have a lot of questions for you.
All right, I'll take them.
You can see them over here.
All right.
On that wall.
Okay. Which one should we go? Are these people in the audience?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So someone's asking me how many hours a day do I spend reading and how do I choose the books you read? That's a great question. I'm very lucky in that reading is my job, right? As an author, you get to read books and no one asks you what are you doing? That's not what I pay you for. I don't have a hard and fast rule. Like I try to read a certain amount per day. I just read when I can. I try to read when I'm eating. I try to read before bed. One of the things, I sort of see myself as a binge reader. So I read on airplanes. I don't buy Wi-Fi when I fly. I don't watch movies. I just read books. So, it was a very long flight over here from Texas, and I read, I think, 2 or 3 books on the plane. So I try to read in sprints like that. When I'm thinking about choosing a book, I think about a couple things. One, is this book likely to stand the test of time, right? So I don't tend to read a lot of new books because I don't know if people are still going to care about this book, but I do want to go back and read the classics of history or the canon. So I try to read books that have a good reputation, that have stood the test of time. I also try to read books one of the questions I like to ask is when I see people that I respect or admire, I go, hey, what books have changed your life? What's a book that had a big impact on you early in your career, in your life? And I feel like if I only read those books, that would be a big impact for me. So,
okay, just to tell her, Ina, what was the name
yes.
of this question? Okay, you have a book that Ryan can sign.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
All right.
Generally, when you're the only one.
Yeah, when you're the
because it has several likes.
Sure. So it says generally when you're the only one, you're also in the what the hell is that one. How do you deal with that? Yeah, that's a good question. But I think the what the hell is that is better than the indifferent reaction of I don't care, right? I kind of like being new and groundbreaking and people asking, what is that? Why are you doing that? I like that reaction. But generally only is better than best because you're not being compared against other people, you're being compared against yourself. So I think there are some downsides to it. Sometimes people don't get what you're doing, but the people who are supposed to get it, they do get it. All right, someone has said they have good results selling other people's products, but when you sell your own products, I have imposter syndrome. Is that ego? Yeah, imposter syndrome is fascinating. Imposter syndrome is this idea that you're a fraud, that people are about to catch you, that people doubt you. The reality is nobody's thinking about you at all. They're all thinking about themselves, right? That's the irony. Everyone has imposter syndrome, so I feel like it cancels it out, right? So I try not to put much stock in that. To me, the ego is in thinking that everyone is thinking about you, right? Thinking that you're the best, that you're amazing, that everyone is eagerly anticipating your next product like it's a blockbuster movie launch. That's egotistical, that's arrogant. So too is thinking that everyone's doubting you, everyone's rooting for you to fail. The reality is no one's thinking about you at all, and so you want to be thinking about how do you break through the noise, how do you get attention, how do you put together a really great marketing plan that's gonna help get you seen in front of the right early adopters.
Okay.
Which one of my books was the most difficult to write and why? I think they're all difficult. There's an expression in writing that your last book won't write your next one, and so we're always starting from scratch. Whether it's an album, even if you started a company that was sold for billions of dollars, you're still starting with 0 users on day one. And how do you sort of actually love that and get excited about the fresh start of it? So all the books are hard. Conspiracy was harder in the sense that it was a different style, a different approach for me. I'd never written a book like that. So that was a tough one. Which one should we do next? What do you like? Are we doing questions from the audience too, or just from here? All right, shout it out. Go for it.
So I hope you can hear me.
I can.
Very bad throat. So I'm Juliana from Mommy Convert. I love your opinion, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm a sneakerhead too. So my question is, would you agree that currently in the e-commerce field, because everyone here is mostly working in e-commerce, we are focusing way too much on acquisitions instead of retention?
Yes, absolutely. And so her question is, are people too focused on acquisition rather than retention? I think yes. I write about that in my growth hacking book. It's like you can grow your business in 2 ways. You can add new customers, or you can expand and increase the relationship you have with your existing customers. And so it's a balance. You don't just want to be strip mining your audience, just trying to get more and more from your existing customers. But I'm a fan of the Iron Maiden strategy. You don't need to be acquiring new fans all the time. Make really great stuff for the people who have told you, I like you, I'm a fan of you, I'm a follower of you. And most importantly, don't lose those people. So when I look at my email list, I don't just think about how many new people are signing up. I want to see, why are people unsubscribing? Why are they leaving? How can I stop that? I was looking at some math on this on my list a couple weeks ago, and it was like, hey, if we can decrease our list, our unsubscribe rate by 10%, we'll be doubling our growth, like we'll be doubling our acquisition, right? Because instead of having to acquire new people to replace them, we'll just be losing less people. So it's like, what if you're bringing people in through the front door, but they're leaving out through the back door? You're netting even. You want to keep the people you have, and I think making products and programs that those people are happy to pay for is probably the best way to grow your business.
Would you think that RFM and NPS are the KPIs of the mature e-commerce?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Do you do NPS right now?
Say that again?
Do you do NPS, Net Promoter Score, right now?
No, I don't, but that sounds very interesting. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience?
How do you stand out from the crowd, even if you have a brilliant idea? The world where marketing budgets dictate what we eat, buy, and like. I think that's a good question. But the truth is, the costs of trying something new and discovering something new have never been lower, right? One of the really big, awesome parts of this sort of e-commerce revolution is that you can sell things directly. You're not dependent on retailers. You're not dependent on distribution. You can own the relationship with your customers. So I think as noisy as it is, and as important in marketing is, and as hard as it is to break through the noise, I think the advantages of the environment that we're in are much higher, and I think I think we're in a great spot. Am I still changing my writing process, or do I use the same one? Yeah, I do think I'm a big believer in routine. I'm a big believer in habit, but ultimately I'm a big believer in process, right? Do the same thing, do it well, and refine and improve as you go. So I am interested in changing and improving, but like, for instance, I do all my research longhand on 4x6 note cards, because that's the system I was trained at when I was starting. And since it works for me, I'm not interested in the experimenting with some crazy new digital way to do it, because the way I have worked. So it's kind of a mix of like, hey, this is the way that works for me, I love it, but then also, being open to new things at the same time.
We still have questions.
All right, here's one. How do you convince people to invest in products that are more qualitative but also more expensive? They're often looking for small prices. I don't like competing on price. To me, that's a race to the bottom. I want to make really awesome things, and I want to charge a fair, solid price for them. At American Apparel, that was one of the things, that was one of the innovations of that company, although obviously it had a lot of other problems, and that's why it's not here today. But what he realized is everyone in fashion was competing to lower their manufacturing costs. So they were shipping overseas, they were trying to make as cheaply as possible, to make as disposable of products as possible. So he's like, look, H&M can make a t-shirt for 40 or 50 cents because they're manufacturing overseas. And he says, okay, it costs us $2 to make a shirt, right? Because we pay fair sweatshop-free wages. So yeah, we're paying 2 to 3 times as much to manufacture as they are. But they're charging $7 for a t-shirt, and we're charging $26 for a t-shirt. What's better, right? So like on the Memento Mori coin that I make, right? By making it in the US, it costs more than making it in China. But because I make it in the US, because I know it's of high quality, because I can tell a story about that product, I can charge a price that allows me to absorb that. And so I'm not competing to sell as many of them as possible to as many people as possible. I'm trying to sell a high quality product to a tribe, to a hardcore audience who are willing to pay what I charge for it. So I think the way you get people to charge a higher price is by making a higher quality product, but also by not competing on price. When you're competing on price, it's a race to the bottom, and you're competing with big behemoths like Amazon or big, venture-based companies that can afford to lose lots of money over the long term. Like you don't want to be competing with WeWork or Uber that's losing billions of dollars a year subsidized by other people, because we don't have that luxury. So yeah.
Okay.
Speaking of Google Plus, why do I think that platform had zero success? Yeah, that's a great question. Look, I think it's funny, I talk about this a little bit in some of my books. Like, what's funny is Google's biggest successes started very small. Gmail started as an internal project, right? YouTube was an experimental thing that they acquired, outside the company, as a search engine. It started as a research paper by some university students. So a lot of Google's biggest successes started small and then were scaled upwards, right? But what Google took the wrong story from that. They took from that we're innovative, we're brilliant, we changed the world, we have, it's our vision that makes us successful. And so with Google Wave and Google Plus and Google Glass, they kind of bought their own bullshit, right? And as a result, I think they way over-invested. They made something that was a solution to a problem that most people didn't have, rather than starting small, starting with a core audience, starting with early adopters, finding influencers who are really champions of that product, and scaling. Google Glass, ironically, as big of a sort of flop and backlash as there was about that, has become successful now as an enterprise product. People in factories use them. There's a strong enterprise use case for that. I wonder if Google had started there and expanded from that core audience, if the whole launch would have been different. Anyone have questions in the audience, or you just want me to keep doing the? All right, shout it out. Yeah. Sure.
It's really tiresome when people stay in the lead position. Except from keep on innovating new stuff. How can you deal with that?
Well, I don't know if I would exclude except for making new stuff. That's like the cycle of life. Like they've shown in the fashion industry that copycats actually increase the overall size of the industry. Because, a t-shirt or pants should last for a couple seasons, right? But the fact that people are always making new ones is what's driving the customers to try new things, right? So it's actually good for the market that there's copycats, because it creates growth in the industry. So I wouldn't be so down on it, but I do agree that it is a bit annoying and frustrating that it happens like that. Yeah, of course, and I deal with that with my products. I see people make rip-offs of them, but because they're rip-offs, because they don't own the relationship with the customer, they're usually selling them for less, right? They're usually selling them through distributors, so they're even taking less. So if you own your core customer, are there a million Iron Maiden ripoffs? Sure, but Iron Maiden fans look to Iron Maiden, and Iron Maiden is able to demand a premium because of who they are. So in some ways, there's no substitute for the original, for the classic. So you don't want to sweat it too much. You don't want to compete with those people. I think you want to continue to not just make new stuff, but continue to refine to be the best in class in your field, and then ultimately own the relationship with your customers. I see that's one of the reasons, for instance, right now, I don't, aside from my books, I don't sell most of my products on Amazon, right? Even though I could probably sell more on Amazon, not only is Amazon taking a cut, but Amazon, people tend to troll Amazon, look for products that are selling and then rip them off, right? So instead of doing that, I want to own my tribe, my audience, make stuff for those people, sell them at the price I want to sell them at, rather than just trying to grow and then inviting those ripoffs. Yeah.
Another question in here.
All right. Yeah, so if you're looking at a red ocean, you go, what is a new way of doing this thing, right? So some of the great examples in that book, I don't know if you guys have Curves Gym here, but so like gyms tend to be for everyone, right? And they said, little old ladies like to go to the gym, but they're intimidated by that. So let's make a gym just for those people, right? Southwest Airlines is a big airline in the US. They said, look, all these big airlines are focused on business class travelers. In books, how do I do it? I go, what's a version of this book that doesn't exist? How can I make a book that's popular for a very specific audience, right? So I'll give you an example. I'm working on a project right now. Parenting books are a huge category, right? What to expect is you're expecting is great, but most of the parenting books are for women, or they're about pregnancy. There's not there's not a lot of great books just for dads. So I'm working on a book just for dads from like the male point of view, right? There's lots of books about Stoicism. There weren't any books that just told stories that illustrate the principles of Stoicism. So that's what Obstacle and Ego was. What? Look for what doesn't exist. And look, if it does exist, just go read that book, right? But if it doesn't exist, then maybe you can write it or publish it. So I'm always looking for part gaps in the market, and I want to own that niche. And I think it's encouraging that, we've been publishing books for 5,000 years, that there's still gaps in the market means that there's gaps in every industry.
Is creating controversy worth sacrificing ethics for?
I would say generally no. That's sort of what my first book is, a cautionary tale in that regard. So how can you be controversial but still be true to who you are, right? And not every brand needs to be controversial, but sometimes it works. Sometimes it's a good strategy.
Okay. Any other questions? Here. Okay.
Yeah, go for it. Yes.
Okay, very nice. I was curious about if you show some examples like Amazon and the drone trend, selling books and accepting Bitcoin, but can you give us examples outside these industries? I mean, maybe media industry, maybe content business. I don't know, how can you apply this?
Yeah, so one of the things that I talk about in the book, there's a strategy called newsjacking, and if you Google the term, there's lots of interesting stuff about it out there. What you're doing, instead of saying like, hey, write about me, I'm interesting, what you do is you take things that other people are writing about that are already in the news, and you relate your product to that, right? So it's hard to sort of talk about this in general terms, but what I'm always looking at is what's trending, what's popular right now, not to make things around that, but to take things that I've made that are timeless and connect it to that as a way of getting attention.
Okay. Any other questions? I have a mic now.
What's my biggest failure as a marketer, and what did you learn from it? It is interesting. I've had a lot of success as a marketer. I've done a lot of things that have gotten tons and tons of attention. but I've probably done 100 different stunts or ideas that got nowhere, right? And so the failures tend to, I think what I've learned from that is that the more shots you take, the better. And so oftentimes I'll see people, they're like, okay, for a launch, we're doing this really expensive viral video, and we're putting on this huge event. They think they do one really big thing, and then it doesn't work, and then that took their entire budget with them. So I think it's about thinking small and doing little experiments, and then building on that from there. So you have to be willing to take lots of risks and lots of shots, and then if 1 out of 10 works, you're in great shape. That's one of the reasons I keep writing books. That's what they're saying. Like, one of the best ways to market your books is keep writing books, because it increases your chances that you'll get lucky finally. Anyone else? Let's shout one out. Maybe do one
One last
audience.
question. Okay, just a second.
Yeah, go for it.
Se poate lumină pe sală, vă rog. Unde? There is one question. Oh, okay.
All right, you want to just shout yours so you don't have to walk? Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, your reaching out the stakes are same.
Yes.
Like the fundamentally that you your client. That's one.
Yes.
How do you balance reading your mind when hustling is
Yeah, no, it's a great tension. So he's talking about the Stoics believe you sort of only control your mind, you only control yourself. How does this work as you're going out and selling things in the world? So I remind myself, I control what I write, I control the energy that I put into the marketing, but I don't control whether people like it. I don't control how many copies it sells in the short term. I don't control whether it gets a positive review or a negative review. I only control what I put in it, right? And so I try to take all my gains, all my happiness off the table before launch day. So my newest book, it came out, and so you do your launch week, and then usually you wait about a week, and then you find out where it landed on the bestseller list. It debuted at #1. That was amazing, but I was already happy with it before that happened. I'm not saying it didn't matter to me, it didn't feel good, but I want that to be extra. I don't want to work on something for 3 years and then have the arbitrary editors at the New York Times decide whether I was a success or not. I want to be able to decide that myself internally, and then I want everything else to be extra. Because again, the world is full of examples of really brilliant stuff that wasn't appreciated in its time. Vincent van Gogh, his reputation now is great, but in his own time it was not appreciated. And so you want to get to a place where you really love what you're doing and you're happy because you know it was your best work, and then everything else was extra.
I have a
Okay.
question.
All right, shout it out.
Do you think that behaving as a media company can be a good perennial marketing strategy for your company?
Is behaving a good marketing strategy?
Behaving like a media company.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. I would say we're all media companies now, right? We all have Twitter accounts and Instagram accounts and email lists. We're all having to create content, right? And so, yeah, I feel like Daily Stoic is a media outlet. We publish video, we have a podcast, we have social media, and it's in giving away all this content that we've built a following, we've built a list that we then market products to. So instead of just making products and then having to pay a media outlet for access to their audience to tell them, hey, I have a new coin, or I have a new book, or I have a new course, I just give stuff away. As I was saying, I give away a book a year or more in free content, but then I monetize that by every couple weeks being able to run my own advertisements. And a lot of my friends who have podcasts have started to think about that the same way. Instead of selling advertisements on their podcast, they just sell their own products. So they're a media company and they're their own advertiser. And I just like that model because it's independent and it's self-sufficient.
Okay. One more question.
One more.
Please. This is the last one.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah, look, when you look at Facebook and Airbnb and Uber and Dropbox, these are companies that are now some of the most valuable companies in the world. but they did not start with big marketing budgets at all. I mean, Airbnb raised $30,000 for their first seed round. They could not turn around and hire a publicist at $10,000 a month. The math just doesn't work. They needed that $30,000 to pay server costs and to buy food, right? And so what they had to do was make a product that really did something for people, and had to make a product that was worth talking about and that was viral. And so when you see these early companies, they didn't have marketing departments, they had growth departments. And so I think about that. Look, the marketing budgets for my first books were basically zero. So I had to make books that were their own marketing campaign and that generated attention. I had to rely on earned media because I couldn't afford media. And then you can bootstrap your way to success, right? So I think we want to, when we study marketing strategies, we want to study the people that started from zero. We don't want to study what multi-billion-dollar companies are doing to grow 5% a year, because we don't have that kind of money to throw around.
Like baby steps.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, learn from the people who built from nothing, not from the people who are, where you hope to be in 50 years, right? Because it's just, one is closer to where you are right now.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
guys very much. I
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much, Ryan.